Please welcome to the stage Executive Director of the Linux Foundation, Jim Zemlin.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It seems like we were just here because we were in November. It's a little bit sunny today. If you remember, for those of you who are in November, we had an atmospheric river come through Napa. So hopefully we'll deliver some great weather today. This is our first post-COVID spring meeting. So the reason that we're here so soon is because we decided to bite the bullet this year and shift this meeting back to its normal pre-COVID spring time frame, because I think all of the events post-COVID sort of congealed towards the end of the year, because post-COVID, things opened up in June, and then everyone had their events, and they all got squished together, and so now we're just kind of readjusting. So we appreciate you coming back. A little bit sparser crowd this year just due to that reset, but I'm glad that you all made it, and I'm sure that this will continue to be one of our best events going forward. We have so much information today, and lots of great breakout sessions, so I'll just get started right away. Before I do that, though, I do want to thank our sponsors, OpenSearch. How many people here know OpenSearch? Pretty much everyone. All right, for those of you who don't, this is essentially a fork of Elastic that has really gained a ton of momentum. OpenSearch is one of our faster growing projects out there. I want to thank our gold sponsors as well. Listed here, AWS, CNCF, Instruct, and thank you all for your support. Let's give them a quick round of applause. So we have a special announcement today. I think some of you have seen this already. Last week, it was announced that the Open Infrastructure Foundation is joining the Linux Foundation, and we're super excited about it. OpenInfra and all of our cloud projects are kind of like peanut butter and chocolate, and I'm sure that Jonathan, who's here, will tell us about how all of these layers of open source infrastructure sort of work together. And so the technology that's coming from OpenInfra is something that we're really excited to promote across all of our membership globally. But the other triple bonus of joining forces with the OpenInfra Foundation is really the people. The team at the OpenInfra Foundation are pretty rarefied folks who have managed a huge consortium of developers and enterprises that come together and collaborate on really definitional software. There's just not a lot of people who have those skills and can do it at that scale. And so having folks like Thierry, Mark, Jonathan, and the whole OpenInfra team come over and be a part of the LF is really, really important. And to that end, I would like to invite up onto stage the Executive Director of the OpenInfra Foundation, Jonathan Bryce, to say a few words about this and the future. Come on up.
It's pretty exciting news for us as well to have announced this. Both of our boards approved this unanimously in the last couple of weeks, and we're moving through the process to finalize this. Jim mentioned some of our projects that we have. A very large community that is extremely global, over 100,000 individuals that participate in our projects across almost every country in the world. Really exciting to I think, merge all of this work together and kind of focus on the future and what we can do. We also have an amazing cast of member companies. These are our platinum and gold members, and we also have silver members and associate members. One of the things that I think is awesome is we actually have 40 to 50 members of OpenInfra that are not yet members of LF. So this is something where our community is coming together. We're actually expanding our overall reach, and we're going to be able to take open source more places. And that's really the thing that I want to hit on today a little bit is the potential that I see for open source, and especially infrastructure specifically. I've been working on digital infrastructure for 32 years now. This is my 32nd year of doing it, and it's something that at times has been like very cool and very hot, and at other times nobody wanted to hear from me about any work that I was doing. It was the plumbing back in the data center. But right now we have some incredible trends at a macro level that are just driving massive investments in infrastructure right now. One is obviously AI, which there's tons of AI content this week, lots of folks here that are working on AI, and you can't really separate AI from infrastructure at the stage that we're at right now, where we're seeing these breakthroughs happen repeatedly. If you look at this, these are driven by infrastructure at the hardware level with the compute, storage, and networking. It's also driven by the software that runs on top of that. Everybody here has probably heard of DeepSeek. Did you all see their week of open source that they did? Who saw DeepSeek's week of open source? Okay, some of y'all. Go look this up, because this was incredible. In addition to the model that they came out with that sort of broke the markets and blew a lot of people's minds, they also released the software that they use to run those models, to train those models, to do all of the operations. And one of the last things they dropped was a new file system that they wrote from scratch called 3FS. Incredible performance, kind of game-changing. And this is, infrastructure software that's getting open sourced right now thanks to this, trillion-dollar investment into AI. The other thing that we see that's another macro issue is the world is feeling less certain. There's a lot of uncertainty around, friends and allies, and where do we do business, and how do we work across geographies now. This is an article from yesterday in TechCrunch talking about what they're doing in Europe to make these massive investments around digital sovereignty. And what is really enabling some of these moves is the open source technology that's out there. So bringing together the set of infrastructure projects that are already at the Linux Foundation with our infrastructure projects, I think the timing could not be better. What an incredible opportunity, what an incredible time to do this, and I'm so excited for our communities and our projects to be able to join forces on this. One thing that's kind of interesting though, Jim mentioned that we have seen this already in action. And I'm assuming a lot of you have heard about some of our projects, especially like OpenStack, but the momentum has really picked up in our communities in the last year. And I want to just throw out a couple of things that maybe you didn't know. For instance, did you know that Geico, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the world, major company here in the US, they have just done a massive replatforming off of proprietary systems onto a fully open stack. And what are they using? Well, they're using OpenStack, yes, but they're using Kubernetes, they're using Ceph, they're using all of these projects. And this is something that is a huge win for a company like Geico to do this. One of my favorite pieces about this is when people talk about replatforming onto open source technology. They go, oh, but what about the total cost of ownership? Well, Geico is a Berkshire Hathaway company, and I think that Warren Buffett is probably pretty good about holding them to account on the total cost of ownership for these kinds of investments and decisions. Walmart has been investing in open source infrastructure for a long time. In the last year, they just passed 1 million cores of compute running inside of their open source infrastructure environment. And what's in there? Ceph, OpenStack, Kubernetes, along with a bunch of networking projects, along with a bunch of other orchestration systems. They've open sourced their own tools. So this is awesome to see, they've been doing this, but they are continuing to invest and grow this to massive scale. AI is seeing a ton of investment here in the US, but also globally. There's a company called NextGen Cloud, which is building what they call the European AI supercloud. And they are a top 10 buyer of NVIDIA GPUs. They're spending $1 billion to build a cloud for GPUs and for AI in Europe. And they're using Ceph, Kubernetes, OpenStack. You get the theme here. Line and Yahoo Japan, one of the biggest tech properties in Asia, 97 million active monthly users. They're running on over 1 million cores of open infrastructure, Ceph, Kubernetes, OpenStack, and some things that they have written and open source themselves. So this move is awesome because of what it represents for our communities, but in some ways it's also formalizing what's already been happening in the wild. All of these organizations with their investments and their choices, they've been working together with these projects. And I think it's going to be great to have these foundations living together, working together, and enhancing that. And our projects, as I mentioned, we've seen awesome momentum, awesome uptake these years. OpenStack's crossed 45 million cores in production across the world. Kata Containers is running in production for hyperscalers for confidential container products. Starling X is running multiple virtual RAN networks that are in the top 10. Zool is being used by BMW, Volvo, other top auto manufacturers as they build their software-defined cars. And we can just bring this together and build on this momentum, bring these projects together, and do something that I think is going to be awesome. So super excited to be going through this process, bringing all of these open source infrastructure components together right now at this moment in history. I know that many of you are already members of the OpenInfra Foundation. If you're not, please meet us this week and help us build the next decade of open infrastructure together. Thank you.
Awesome. Nice job. All right. One of the things that I want to talk about today, and just sort of tailing on Jonathan's talk, is by coming together with OpenInfra and all of the different organizations that are part of the Linux Foundation sort of federation, one of the big values is we can take on big challenges collectively that each of the organizations that are part of the ELF couldn't have taken on individually. And one of the biggest challenges we're facing today in open source is that we're sort of victims of our own success. Open source is now a fundamental building block of all modern computing. You just saw these huge multinational corporations that are replatforming on a pure open source stack. And as part of that, there are all sorts of new challenges when you become this fundamental building block. And I've talked about that before, and I want to talk a little bit more about it today. How security, trust, and innovation are kind of colliding in a world where we are seeing uncertainty, as Jonathan mentioned about how we work together, or the rise of sort of techno-nationalism and more balkanization happening, which goes essentially directly the opposite of what we all want in open source, which is a organic way that anybody can participate and innovate collectively. And so the question is, where are we headed? What happens next? And I think, and I talked about this in the last event here, we're entering what I'd like to characterize as a regulated era of open source. And when I say regulation, I don't mean like specific laws per se. I'm thinking more broadly in terms of much more scrutiny around open source. And this is just a simple timeline of what we've seen open source accomplish over the last 30-odd years. In the 90s, open source was largely a way to provide free alternatives to proprietary software, right? And was sort of a trailing component of technical innovation. But in the early 2000s, that really flipped as people saw the success of Linux, Apache, critical, MySQL, big open source projects. Folks also started to realize that this is really a better way to innovate. And so open source wasn't a trailing indicator of innovation, it became the leading indicator and source of innovation in areas like software-defined networking, and certainly in artificial intelligence, and continuing to this day, culminating, I think, in some of the amazing breakthroughs we're seeing from organizations like DeepSeek, code that's being released and co-developed coming from organizations here in the United States like Meta, all of the activity that you see in Hugging Face. There is just a huge amount of organic new innovation happening in open source. And with that is coming this scrutiny. One of the first things that happens when you become this fundamental building block is hackers start to pay attention because open source is an attack vector, just as proprietary software in the 90s was the main attack vector because that's what people were using. Now open source is an attack vector for cyber criminals to exploit open source software. In addition, we've seen a whole bunch of new regulation around open source, or sort of adjacent to open source that impacts this code development. Things like the Cyber Resiliency Act in the EU, global sanction regimes that we're seeing and continue to see. And so, if you sum it all up, the sobering news here and why we as an open source industry and community need to work together is, I think the days of sort of minimal scrutiny and anything goes are probably winding to a close in open source. That doesn't mean that open source is winding to a close. It just means that we're reaching a new level of maturity and have a new set of challenges that we need to collectively tackle. You can see the list here of cyber threats and increased regulatory matters. And I think the most important thing here, if we look and we're honest about all of the geopolitical tension that's happening today, one of the things that we want to preserve is our ability for anybody to participate in open source from anywhere on Earth. And if we are going to do that, we need to do it in a way where we can demonstrate clearly that the people, the organizations that work on these definitional open source projects are trustworthy. Because it's not as much about security these days as it is about trust. And so when you talk about trust and security, I think one of the three questions that we need to ask in order to improve both security and trust is to figure out, okay, what exactly are we talking about when we say open source and definitional open source? There are 80 million repos out there on GitHub, maybe more than that. I don't know, what's the latest count on GitHub, like 100 million repos or something like that. But when you really look down at the base, it's really more like 50, 60,000 open source projects that are truly deployed in large enterprises and governments and systems consistently. And then you look at the open source code that is actually used to run critical systems that's security critical, where you can escalate privilege and where they really network exposed, crypto's involved, it's an even smaller subset. And so one of the things that we need to do is figure out what is the world's most important open source software so that we can prioritize both security and building trust within those communities. That's one of the important things about all of us coming together, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about OpenInfra joining the LF is the LF and our corresponding ecosystems really are the home to a lot of that critical software. Now, the second important question to ask is who actually writes that software? It turns out that there's a super long tail. There's millions of developers who work in the Linux Foundation communities every day, and a huge long tail of those developers. But there's also a very small head of developers that write a lot of this code. I did a search on our Insights tool in LFX yesterday, and the question was, in the last 10 years, how many developers wrote 50% of the Linux kernel code? Like half the code in the kernel. How many developers do you think wrote that code? Does anybody have a guess? Over 100? 600? 6? Was that Greg Crow-Hartman? Did you say, where is he? That's odd. It's 85. It's 85. When I ask that question, I get such a range of responses. 1 million, 10,000. But there are a small group of maintainers that write a lot of this code. Building trust amongst those people is really, really important. And of course, the main question is not only what's important, who writes it, but then is this stuff secure? Can it be sustained? Like, is it healthy? And when we think of these things, historically, the Linux Foundation has been focused on security. And I think the open source industry has really been focused on security. And there's a good reason for that too, right? Like if your software is vulnerable and hackers are exploiting it and stealing things and doing all sorts of bad stuff, that's not good. So you got to make sure that the house is locked and people really take that seriously. But now we're evolving into an era where we need both security and we need trust. And those things are fundamentally different. Security and trust are different, but you really can't have security without trust. And that's what I really want to talk about today, is what can we do to create more trust in open source and in the people and organizations that participate in those critical projects. And this is spurred on by, some new attacks that we're seeing around social engineering exploits, where, an unknown actor is able to, over a couple of years, build reputation through code contributions in a project and then attempt to backdoor it. I think everyone here knows about the XZ attack vector. I won't go into it in too much detail, but essentially some unknown actor got in, and it freaks everyone out, right? Like, who are these people? Where do they come from? Who's backing them? Nobody knows. Jiatan just kind of showed up, spent a couple of years in GitHub working on this XZ util, and was somehow able to get the commit bit. And fortunately, somebody figured it out. But the failure was Jiatan, that identity, getting the commit bit, not the fact that the vulnerability actually happened. And we keep seeing this. In our OpenJS projects, we're seeing continued attacks of social engineering, of people trying to come in and participate in open source projects to exploit them in nefarious ways. And so today, one of the things that I want to propose to everyone, and I want to talk about a meeting that we're having here at this event tomorrow, is, maybe we should come up with something similar to the security scorecards that we have. I think all of you have seen the Open Source Security Foundation's scorecards, which tell you, if a project has a certain security ranking based on, whether it's fuzzing or all sorts of criteria. Maybe it's time to create something similar with a trust scorecard. And in order to do that, we're going to need new tools. And today I want to propose a specific new way to do that we're going to be talking about this week. I think in order to create a trust scorecard, in order to create better trust that can be adopted broadly at scale to enable people to take a risk-based approach to what open source software they use based on trust, we need a decentralized trust system to do that. And let me kind of tell you what that looks like. We're proposing a new project called the First Person Project. And the First Person Project is something that tries to solve one of the oldest problems on the internet, which is figuring out who's real and who's fake. How many people here have ever gotten bad information from some anonymous poster on the internet, or ever seen anything like that? Any of you? How many here think that's the majority of content on the internet? Oh my God. See, look at that. We can't trust any of this stuff. Forever, this has been a problem. Like, people think like, oh, this is just a new social media thing, and there's all of these anonymous identities, sort of, smack posting. But this has actually been a problem for a very long time on the internet. And there's been just a huge array of proposals about trying to figure out how we can set up a system to know who we can trust on the internet. And we obviously have never solved this problem. And you all just demonstrated this, right? Which is like, you laugh when you say, like, how many people here have seen content that they can't trust on the internet, and everyone laughs. It's like, that's all the content. There's just been all these different ways to do it. People, oh, maybe we'll do biometric things. Maybe it'll be a government ID. Maybe we need and I've heard this from banks and other institutions that use open source. We want to see something similar to the financial sector's KYC, know your customer. You can't open a bank account without a government ID. We want to see that same thing for developers. You got to show your ID before you can commit code on GitHub. Like, hundreds and hundreds of proposals like this. And this is now getting even more urgent because technology is progressing this urgency. Just last August, there was a group that got together to try and figure out how to do better credentialing. And they have alternative proposals to this as well, But the gist of this work was really that new AI technology has made this really urgent because not only are there a lot of phony identities out there saying phony things that you can't trust, but now AI is making it incredibly easy to do that in a credible way. Brian, who's here in the front, I was listening to a podcast on open source security. Brian Fox was on a podcast, and I think you were talking about how now one of the top phishing attack vectors is no longer like email, it's voice phishing, where you can replicate Jim Zemlin's voice, and then Jim calls his mom and says, "Mom, I need you to give me your banking information," and this is now becoming a top cyber attack vector. And so this is like an urgent problem. And so I do think that personhood credentials is a big issue, and you might ask, boy, this first person thing sounds really, really hard. It seems kind of above the Linux Foundation's pay grade, right? This seems like a bigger thing, and why would the Linux Foundation and Jim be thinking about this? And the pitch I want to make is, for a lot of things that kind of change the world, sometimes they happen small in areas where people are willing to do the work and are naturally suited to do it, and then those concepts can expand from there. And so the pitch I want to make to all of you is that I think open source is a good place to start with this kind of decentralized credentialing systems, because open source developers, first of all, want it. Here's Greg? I know Greg is here somewhere. Is Crow Hartman back? There he is. You're always in the same corner back there. So I don't know if folks realize this, but the Linux kernel community does not allow anonymous maintainers to participate in their community. They do allow pseudonymous, so you don't have to use your real name publicly, but you have to be a known, verified person, a real person that people know. And the way that they do this is through good old-fashioned key signing parties, right? For those of you who are old enough, we get together with our IDs in hand and cryptography keys that we exchange, and that's how you are able to securely establish trust between kernel developers. The problem is that doesn't scale all that well. But the key insight is this is something that open source people already want and are already doing. The other thing is, I think open source developers in piloting a system like this are able, more than most people in society, to actually provide good feedback technically about the project itself. In fact, sometimes a little bit too much feedback, but we'll leave that for another day. Also, there's just a totally open, trackable history of all open source code and all of the identities that are participating in it. So what a better place to start trying to figure out how to establish trust. And it's actually a smaller subset of the internet that's much more tractable problem and is sort of mission critical due to the way that it's deployed. And so this is a pretty good place to start. But most importantly, it does one thing that everybody in open source collectively says they want, no matter whether it's a government or an organization or an individual, which is we want to preserve permissionless entry. We want to make sure that anybody can hop in and start innovating. Whether you're a PhD student or work for a company, we want you in. We want it worldwide, right? Because innovation comes from unexpected places, right? That's the nature of human, thinking. And so in order to preserve those fundamental values in open source, we need better ways to trust each other. And we need to be able to demonstrate to regulators that we have ways to establish trust, right? And I hate to say this, but sometimes the answer to problems that start with tech are answered by, yes, more technology. And in this case, I think it really is true. And here at the Linux Foundation, we sort of have the technical components to get this done. And here's what we're kind of thinking about, is we would create a decentralized credentialing system to facilitate trust, where individuals, through blockchain technology, would have wallets that they would own themselves, information about themselves. Did I go to a college? Do I have a credential from a university? Do I have a known employer? Did I attend Linux Foundation Membership Summit? Do I have a verified driver's license or passport? And those credentials, information about yourself, private information, you can keep in your wallet. And those credentials can be verified by all sorts of different service providers, maybe Clear, maybe an ID that you get from the California driver's license, or a credential that you get when you register for this event, or from your employer. They're all sort of decentralized way to provide a credential. You keep it in your wallet. And then most importantly, open source projects themselves, like the kernel, maybe we start with the kernel. I know I've talked to Linus and Greg a lot about this. They establish their trust policy. So the kernel can say, you have to have a verified identity, government issued, let's say. It's up to them. You don't have to use your real name on the mailing list or publicly. We don't care about that. You have to have a known employer. You have to have showed up for an event. And if you want to be even more trustworthy, I guess, you could set even more stringent credentialing criteria. Point is, it's about the project, it's about how they want to establish trust and how people who would then consume that software would establish their risk profile based on their trust criteria. So think of it as this trust scorecard, where today you establish trust purely on code, usually, other than projects like the kernel, which are very mature and have this key signing mechanism. But this is how Gia Tan established trust. A couple years, consistently contributing, pretty decent code, got trustworthy, and then was able to become a maintainer. But what I'm suggesting is it's not just internal project history you would look at, it would be shared trust data about employer, conference attendance, et cetera. And that would get you on a high or low trust track. And so here's just like the highest level concept of a trust algorithm that you could put in place that's based on both participation in the community, you're contributing good code, is any of that code vulnerable, and stuff about you as a person or part of an organization that would be other factors of establishing trust. And you could get this sort of trust algorithm to allow people to have different levels. And again, I'm just sort of spitballing this thing today. We have a whole meeting tomorrow to go over this, but you get the concept, right? You get gradual levels of trust until at the highest level you can then get the commit bit. People trust the code because it's being maintained by super trustworthy people. Here's specifically what it would look like, and I like to pick on Greg a lot, and I think this really gives you a good example of how this would work in practice. Gia Tan wouldn't have really happened in a community that was using these trust algorithms because only people like Greg Crow-Hartman would have gotten the commit bit, right? He does excellent quality code, he has an impeccable security record, but he also has a verified employer. He shows up for events physically. People actually know who this person is. Long digital history, strong endorsement credentials that he has permission to share out of his digital identity or digital reputation scorecard. And that would be a system that meets privacy concerns, allows projects to set up their own processes and policies, is a scalable way to preserve trust across all of these different ecosystems. And so we're already underway working on this. We have our LF Decentralized Trust group, who I challenged last fall to work on this, and have already come back with a ton of great ideas about this, and a very comprehensive, I think it's like a 98-page FAQ on this thing. The Trust Over IP Foundation also works on this with our Open Wallet Foundation and our DIF organization. This is something we can do. And so I want to challenge all of you to think about how you would like to participate in this. Particularly if you work at a large enterprise that cares about establishing trust, we'd like to get you involved in this effort. Come and talk to any of the event staff or talk to my team about the meeting tomorrow, but I'd like to get you all involved in this. So that's my pitch. In a world that is sort of on the edge of balkanizing, and there's a lot of distrust, and there's a lot of Should we let those people participate, and should we give people access to that stuff? I think if we can come up with scalable ways to better establish trust, we can really continue to preserve what we care about in open source. So thank you very much for looking at that. And with that, I have some project announcements today. We're always adding new projects to the Linux Foundation, and I want to go through a few of them that we're announcing this week. First, our Coalition for Smarter Building Foundation, C4SB. This is a project that develops standards. It's part of our joint development foundation for smart buildings, more energy efficient, smarter building infrastructure. It's supported by a huge range of organizations. You can see the list here. If you're interested in participating in this project, just go ahead and look at the website listed right there. We're also announcing a new project for support of Chromium-based browsers. In January, we launched this. A group of companies, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Opera, folks who are all creating Chromium-based browsers are getting together to pool resources to work on Chromium together. So we really want to thank the sponsors of that. It's a neutral place where everybody can get together and invest. Finally, we have some new AI projects. It wouldn't be a tech event without mentioning AI, and we have some new projects from IBM, Dockling, BAI, Data Prep Kit that are coming into our LF AI and Data Foundation. These are all critical projects. It turns out that a frontier model, a large language model, doesn't just come into existence by itself. There's a whole bunch of work that you need to do around data preparation and so forth, and these are projects that enable that. So we're happy to have them here at the foundation. So with that, I want to introduce our next speaker this morning, who is the head of our Linux Foundation Europe organization, who will talk quickly about work that's going on in our European organization. If those of you don't remember, we have set up regional organizations around the world where if you join the Linux Foundation Europe, it's a European entity where Europeans can collaborate in their region. It has reciprocity with the United States organizations and other organizations, and it allows us to have a structural way at the Linux Foundation across our federation to participate locally as well as globally to maintain sovereignty in one place, but also to be able to collaborate worldwide. And so Gab is the head of that organization. He's going to come and tell us what's the latest going on in LF Europe.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning. I just want to give you a quick update on what's going on in Europe. Just going to take, half an hour. Now, as Jim said, I think reciprocity and keeping collaboration global, it's a theme that is getting more and more important as geopolitics and sort of balkanization of open source keeps coming up. LF Europe is growing, is accelerating its pace. We have now 180 members. We're announcing a new project. When I was here in November, we announced the intent to form for a project called NeoNephos, which actually hits on quite a bit of the themes that Jim mentioned. If you guys are familiar with IPSI, it's a European funding of 1.2 billion for important projects for common European interest, distributed through European countries, European private companies, in the space of cloud and edge. And next week, or 2 weeks from now, at KubeCon, we're going to actually formally announce NeoNephos as the first open source outcome out of this IPSI initiative. And the part that I'm really excited about, what Jim was saying, is we can do something that is specific for Europe, but allows to keep open source global. We can build on all the building blocks that we have in the Linux Foundation, and as of today, I'm very excited to see what we can do also with the OpenInfra Foundation that, as Jonathan said, really already is widely deployed across this stack. What we want to avoid is to create sort of fragmented open source, to create regional specific open source. This is really the one aspect that has remained quite global, and I think we all wish that it stays that way. The second area where open source, as Jim said, is entering a new era is the era of regulated open source. And LF Europe is really, again, accelerating its pace in supporting our communities, our projects, our manufacturers that build on upstream open source projects, and of course the stewards, which with the CRA have some degree of obligations when it comes to reporting on our projects. When I was here in November, I was standing here announcing our first workshop in Amsterdam on bringing together and getting your feedback on what we should do around the CRA. Since then, we launched, thanks to our OpenSSF Foundation, our global cybersecurity regulation. I see Krov there, who's played a major part in getting this going. I'll tell you a little bit how you can get involved, but we like to have a data-driven approach to things, and so we started with some research that, unsurprisingly, has uncovered quite a bit of lack of readiness in our communities, and especially in Europe, when it comes to the CRA. You can look at all the details there. We're announcing this report today, but TLDR, over 60% of folks are not familiar with the CRA of our respondents. Almost 30% of folks, less than 30% of folks have any idea of the deadlines that are coming up in 2027 with respect to the CRA. So a lot of work is needed there, and we're doing a couple of things in this space. First and foremost, we have projects like the Civil Infrastructure Platform, the Yocto project, and Zephyr that are already sort of leading the way in terms of pathways to comply with best practices to comply with the CRA. And so this is another report that we're putting out today that really starts showing by example how some of our projects are already trying to get ahead of the game. But as I said, out of the workshop in Amsterdam in December, OpenSSF has been taking the lead, and we now have a global regulatory policy working group. This is a great way for you to be involved, and honestly to help us understand what our projects and you as manufacturers upstream need from the projects that you depend on. So here's your QR codes, GitHub repository, Slack channel, mailing list. Beyond that, we'd love to see you involved in our events in Europe. We are ramping up our activities there. We're announcing today our European Member Summit. It's going to be in Ghent. It's not Brussels, but it's close enough, and obviously that's on purpose. It's going to be in October. We hope to see you there. And last but not least, we are launching a new series of events. It's called LF Europe Roadshow. It focuses very much on themes and areas that are fundamental to Europe. We have a vertical foundation like Finos, which is obviously near and dear to my heart, running an event in Milan, and then we have an event in Ghent attached to the Member Summit in October on the regulated era of open source. So we hope to see you there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gab. All right, well, yeah, please do participate in those events. We're also going to be in London in 2 weeks for KubeCon EU, even though I know London's not technically a part of the European Union. But there'll be, I think, about 13,000 developers at that event, and we're really looking forward to that. If you are able to attend, we'd love to have you there. And so at this point, I would like to introduce our first new non-LF speaker, non-LF staff speaker, Madelyn Olson from Amazon Web Services. She is a principal software engineer at AWS and maintainer of the Valkey project. Today, she's going to talk to us about how a fork made the Valkey community better than ever. Please welcome Madelyn Olson.
So about a year ago, I was discussing a new feature with the Redis core team, which at the time was the individuals, including myself, who were responsible for the development of the open source Redis project. We were talking about a new multi-threaded performance feature, which would improve both the performance and the reliability under high CPU conditions of the engine. The conversation we had wasn't about the benefits it was going to provide to the community, but instead it was about the complexity. At the time, the manifesto that drove the project really wanted us to push against complexity. And so at the time, that's what we did. We chose to defer the feature until a point in time where we had a better solution. Just a few short weeks after that conversation, Redis would ultimately move away from an open source license, and the Redis core team that I was a part of would get dissolved. At the time, I thought this would be bad for the community. I thought that engineers would get dispersed around, and we would lose the community that we had built up. And I'm going to tell you a story about why that didn't happen. So as Jim mentioned, my name is Madelyn Olson. I'm a principal engineer at AWS, and I've been working on Amazon Elasticsearch, a managed provider of high-performance databases, for about 10 years, of which 6 of those were almost exclusively dedicated to working on open source software. Right after I learned about the fork, I got together with various members of the community, and we created the Valkey project, a BSD fork of the last open source version of Redis, helped shepherded by the Linux Foundation. This new group knew we wanted to keep the open source spirit of the Redis project alive, but we also wanted Valkey to be more than just a fork. We organized a contributor summit in Seattle, where we got together developers and users to try to figure out what this new project should look like. At the time, I was really expecting us to just focus on caching, the main workload that Redis open source was serving at the time. But what we heard from our users is they wanted so much more. They wanted Valkey to be a high-performance database for all sorts of distributed workloads. And so although that would add a lot of complexity to the project, the new core team sort of took on that mantle, and we tried to build that for our community. We re-had the same discussion about the performance improvements I talked about, and we decided to implement it. And although it was complicated, we were able to successfully launch that feature in Valkey 8.0 late last fall, which increased the performance of the Valkey engine up to 3x. To the delight of our users, and with minimal operational impact, both in the open source community, as well as the various managed services that provide Valkey. This emboldened us to push further and try to build more features in the engine and try to improve the engine. Over the last couple of months, we've been dramatically improving the core engine by adding Rust into the core to add memory-safe new features. We've been changing the internal algorithms for how the cluster mode works to improve reliability and improve the failover times. And we've been dramatically changing how the internal data structures work, since they were based on 10-year-old pieces of software at the time, so that they can better take advantage of modern hardware. In just a few short weeks, we'll be releasing these improvements as part of Valkey 8.1, just 1 year after the anniversary of the project. This new release includes up to 20% memory efficiency improvements, which is the most common bottleneck within caching systems, but also state-of-the-art new data structures, including the JSON and Bloom data types. This also, again, would not be a tech conference if we didn't talk about some of the AI features we're also working on, which includes vector similarity search. So you're now able to create vector similarity indexes on top of those JSON data types. This is a really exciting launch for us, and I just want to thank all the individuals, over 250 of them which contributed to the project, over the 40 supporting organizations, as well as the Linux Foundation for making this all possible. The community that built up around Valkey brought a fresh set of eyes. Individuals who were willing to challenge the established norms within our community. They pushed us to build the best possible version of Valkey. Not just a fork, but a vibrant community willing to push the technological boundary. This is how vendor-neutral open source projects are supposed to work. I'm excited about the future of Valkey. We have a roadmap of exciting new functionality, including true native multi-threaded performance improvements, a new highly scalable clustering system that will improve failover times and improve scalability, as well as a bunch of new core changes to the data types. But we're still looking to grow. If you're interested in helping us build high-performance databases or looking to integrate with a high-performance database, I hope you will consider joining us. We're easy to find on GitHub, as well as we're easy to try out within Docker. So if you're interested, I hope you'll come and maybe talk to me throughout this conference. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the keynote.
Thank you. I remember when Valkey was announced, how many people sent me notes and said, it's never going to work. That forks are super hard, particularly this kind of software, and Madelyn and the crew in the Valkey project, I think, have proved all of that is wrong, that this fork is really, really successful. Our next project, our next speaker is from a very, very popular project. How many people here have heard of Project Jupyter? All right. I know many of you here in November where we announced the formation of the Jupyter Foundation to support Project Jupyter. And our next speaker is an executive council member from Project Jupyter and is going to join us to share what's been happening and what's in store for Project Jupyter. Please welcome Anna Ruvalcaba. I think I got the right name. Ruvalcaba.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here today to share a bit of the history of Project Jupyter with you all and its governance. I plan to review 3 components of healthy open source software communities, and these are components that I believe play an important role in facilitating innovation in open source. Before I begin, I do want to share a brief history of my work with Project Jupyter. In 2015, Jupyter received $6 million in funding from various private foundations. Those grants were split between 2 Project Jupyter principal investigators and co-founders, Brian Granger, who was at the time at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, and also Fernando Perez at UC Berkeley. I was hired not long after, in 2016, to oversee and focus on operations at Cal Poly. This mainly included grants management, community and core developer events, and a Jupyter internship program through which we trained almost 50 college students over a multi-year period. Eventually, my role at Jupyter became much more globally focused, and I shifted into working in executive leadership, focusing on governance and community building at a bigger scale at Jupyter. For the past 9 years have been quite a journey for me. To be 100% honest, when I started with Jupyter, I didn't even know what open source was. And here I am on the stage representing our team today. So I feel really privileged to have the chance to do that. Project Jupyter's mission is to empower people of all backgrounds to think, collaborate, and share knowledge using computational storytelling. Last November, after a lengthy process to completely revamp our governance structure, Project Jupyter joined the Linux Foundation, transferring an existing 501c3 and creating a new C6. Project Jupyter is made up of 10 different sub-projects, and those are listed here. I'll read them out in case you're not familiar with them. Jupyter Accessibility, Jupyter Book, Jupyter Foundations and Standards. One of our largest sub-projects, which is Jupyter Front Ends, and that includes Jupyter Lab and Jupyter Notebook. There is Jupyter Hub, Jupyter Kernels, Jupyter Security, Jupyter Server, Jupyter Widgets, and finally, voila. There is also a large amount of software powered by Jupyter or built upon Jupyter, and our full list of official projects is a little bit nuanced. So This isn't the complete list, but we do publish that in our documentation at jupyter.org/governance. So for perspective and a sense of history, we can look back at how Jupyter managed strategy and operations and compare that to what is happening today. So in 2015, we had one legal entity, one leadership body, and about 20 to 25 core developers. The Project Jupyter, we had a BDFL model, and that the steering council managed both our technical operations or technical software and our overall operations. Fast forward to 2025, and we've experienced tremendous growth. We now have 2 legal entities, as I mentioned, our C3 and our C6. We have 3 leadership bodies and 10 sub-project councils that represent somewhere between 60 to 75 core developers. They're kind of hard to count because some of them serve on multiple councils. And a full list of our leadership bodies and people who participate in them can be found also in our governance documentations. So I'd like to zoom in a little bit and tell you more about the 3 Jupyter leadership bodies and how they operate. First, there is our 501c3 leadership bodies. There's 2 different boards or steering councils. The first one is the Jupyter Executive Council. We're focused on overall global strategy and operations. That includes 6 elected members to that board. There is also the Software Steering Council. That is our technical leadership. There's 1 representative from each of our sub-projects in that body. They oversee Jupyter enhancement proposals. And then finally, there is sub-project councils and standing committees, working groups. And our website for the 501c3 is jupyter.org. Next, there is our 501c6. This is a leadership body that was formed when we joined the Linux Foundation in November of last year, and its main focus is to engage in activities that support the mission of Project Jupyter. This group is highly motivated to make an impact on Jupyter, and it's been wonderful to work with them. So many thanks to all of our premier members. This new group represents an important part of Jupyter's future and is an important mechanism for sustainability at Jupyter and industry engagement. That leadership or that governing board currently has all of the members from the executive council at our C3, so that's 6 people, as I mentioned before, plus currently 6 premier members. We also have 5 general members with an election pending for that group. And the website for that, for our C6 is jupyterfoundation.org. So when we compare where we started to where we are now, both in terms of our governance and our software, the growth has been tremendous. But what got us here won't get us there. We're currently facing some technical challenges and cultural challenges. First, there is the size of our sub-projects and our developer community has increased significantly in the last decade. There is also a maintenance aspect in that Jupyter is a critical piece of infrastructure in industry, science, academia, tech, and beyond. The Jupyter stack has grown to hundreds of GitHub repositories using thousands of dependencies in multiple coding languages and is maintained by a globally distributed community. The bar for contributions in 2015 compared to the bar for contributions in 2025 is much higher, and this represents a barrier to new contributors and new contributions. There is also cultural challenges. Building a healthy team culture in a community that has grown this large and distributed is not easy. Transparency and outbound communication from leadership takes time, and it requires consistent and dedicated effort. And sometimes we're so busy doing the things that it's hard to communicate about what it is that we're doing. And so having joined the Linux Foundation puts us in a place where we are well positioned to face these challenges in 2025. We are at an important inflection point at Jupyter, and there are 3 areas of focus or opportunities that are central to the growth and health of any open source community. and I'll share a little bit about them now. I'll share a little bit more about why strong project governance and infrastructure is the foundation for contributor satisfaction and innovation. The first aspect is sustainable infrastructure. In general, there can be a negative view towards the cost of operations or overhead. Funders want to support new programs, but not new overhead. And so we can't only fund cool stuff. We have to fund the people and the practices and the things that make that cool stuff possible. The glue work is important, and it should not be taken for granted. Next, there's organizational culture. There's a couple of aspects of making this a reality. One is a clear strategic vision from leadership of a project that includes an inspiring mission, vision, values. That includes practices and tactics that support that strategic vision, including events, code of conduct, mentorship opportunities, mentee opportunities. It's also important for there to be standard and best practices that cut across teams. So sub-project consistency, practices that cut across the entire org. At the end of the day, we want to create a high-trust environment and teams that people want to be a part of. And the last thing that supports creating this organizational culture that I'm talking about is community outreach and communications through website, blog, social media. So I was recently at an event in Brazil with Melissa Weber Mendonca, and she and I were talking about developer experience. She's senior DevX engineer at Quantsite, and she shared this quote with me, and I want to share it with you today. Focusing on developer experience not only enhances a team's ability to collaborate, innovate, and maintain high-quality, sustainable software by reducing friction and technical barriers, but it also ensures a smoother onboarding process for new contributors, bringing fresh ideas and diverse perspectives that make the team stronger and more resilient. Jupyter's success is powered by its community. Sub-project councils and the people who serve on them are the key to the future at Jupyter. By allowing open source contributors to focus their efforts on their work, a healthy project governance and community becomes the foundation not only for contributor satisfaction, but also innovation. So there are various members of the Jupyter Foundation governing board here in the audience today. I am going to ask you to briefly just stand up really quick and wave to everyone and say hi. We are interested in, there they are. There's some folks over there. I think that's, a couple in the back. So there's quite a big Jupyter team here at this event, and we're looking forward to connecting with all of you about Project Jupyter.
Thank you. Nicely done. All right, our next speaker is from the Rust Foundation. The Rust Foundation is not a part of the Linux Foundation. I was told to say that right up front for the Rust community. But Rebecca Rumbul is a very special friend of the Linux Foundation and is here to give us an update on one of the hotter projects in open source that is really solving a lot of memory safety issues and all kinds of good things. Please welcome Rebecca Rumbul.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me here. It's great to be here. As Jim said, I'm here to talk a little bit about Rust. But not to the exclusion of all else. I want to talk a little bit about a lot of the themes that have already come up today. So not just the future of Rust and the challenges we faced, but also, the importance of collaboration and existing within this wonderful open source community. So you might have seen some of these things before. Rust is consistently voted as one of the best loved programming languages in the world. Stack Overflow survey keeps churning that out. That's great. But it's also one of the fastest growing. It's something that is really picking up speed, which we love. It's great that loads of people are flocking to use Rust. And so our goal as the Rust Foundation as open source steward is to make sure that Rust programming language is safe, secure, sustainable as possible. You know, we want to make sure that it is useful for everyone to use and that it can take us into the future. So talking about growth, the lines go up. This is just a kind of quick snapshot of downloads of Crates packages. So Crates is our package repository. You can see just between 2022 and 2025, that's a big increase. We are breaking records all of the time with how many people are coming to Crates and downloading. And that's great, right? You know, we want people to use it. So it's really heartening to see that people are embracing the language, that the tech industry is playing ball. And you know, it's a testament to the hard work that our community are putting into making and maintaining this great language. And a lot of that is about the memory safety. You know, we've already heard it from a couple of people today. Memory safety, security, these are really important things for people. Rust, of course, it's not the only memory safety language we know. And before anyone puts their hand up, yes, I know we have an unsafe as well. But for the most part, you know, people are coming for the memory safety. There's been so much talk about memory safety over the last few years. The White House, CISA, the EU, the UK, lots and lots of governments, and lots of tech organizations are really kind of promoting this, actually, memory safety by default for new products, if possible. So this memory safe message, it's really important to make sure it's not confused with memory safety just equals security, because a couple of journalists have actually kind of suggested that to me, and that's kind of terrifying. No, we don't want to just assume that just because something's memory safe, it's completely secure. But because of this narrative, we feel very keenly that Rust needs to kind of push itself. We need to go above and beyond to make sure that Rust is as secure as possible, that it is as secure that you can have confidence in using it, because it's a really high risk for us. You know, if Rust, on the one hand, yay, memory safety, but on the other hand, oh my God, have you seen the state of the Crates ecosystem? Anyone can get in there and do anything. So that's not what we want. We want everyone to have confidence in Rust, that it is secure as it can possibly be. So this is one of the first initiatives I spun up when I joined the foundation about 3.5 years ago. We need to invest in security. We need to do as much as possible upstream, so as it goes downstream, people are protected. So a big shout out about that to Alpha Omega and to AWS, who actually helped fund that security initiative work. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible. Security, as I'm sure most people here know, is not cheap. But actually, our security initiative costs about $600,000 a year, which I think is an absolute bargain, quite frankly. I don't know how much any of you at companies spend on your security teams, but it's probably a lot more than that for a lot smaller products. So I think we're providing a huge amount of value for free to the entire kind of user community for that security. Speaking about security as well, I kind of want to zoom out a little bit because we get bogged down, very, very bogged down, in we need to do this for security reasons, or, oh, there's a requirement coming down the line, so we better have a look at this, or we better develop a way to tick this regulatory box. And I think we forget the big picture. Security is there to protect normal people. You know, the outcome of that work is not, oh, I complied with a regulation, yay me. It's actually the people that are using the products that are built on all of our building blocks as open source. It's them you're protecting. This was brought into very sharp focus for me on Saturday night when I landed in San Francisco airport. And I got on the BART train to come into town, and I was mugged. And I'm not telling you the story for the sympathy, but thank you very much. I'm telling you because, this person assaulted me, they stole my phone. And that experience, whilst terrible, was not the end of the world. Because everyone here, all of this, even the smallest contributions we make to security in open source as companies, it means that at that moment, when that phone was snatched from my hand, all of that security started kicking in. So my bank accounts weren't immediately drained. You know, my identity wasn't immediately stolen. It was horrible, but all of the efforts that we collectively make here made sure that actually normal people like me who have a horrible experience, they have some protection there. And I love the fact that, you know, we should remember that, not just, you know, from my personal, but for everyone else that experiences these kind of things. So thank you. Thank you to everyone here that puts effort into security. It is not just a tick box exercise. It is helping normal people everywhere. And we should be proud of that we work together to do that. So back to Rust. As you know from the last few slides, growth, the line goes up. And we've done a lot, we've done as much as we can with the resources we have to make sure Rust is a safe bet. But we need to balance that. We're hyper aware that just growth is not necessarily the best way to do things. You know, it's not really going to be sustainable if we kind of go hell for leather towards one goal and we leave everything else to kind of crumble behind us. We need to bring everyone with us. We have a lot of diverse stakeholders. As Jim alluded to, they might have a lot of opinions. And we need to make sure that we have a kind of unified community that are invested in a direction of travel together to make sure that, again, Rust is useful and relevant for the future. We invest a lot in our community, and we consult a lot with our community. And that's the right thing to do, because without them, without all of the hard work they put in, there's no Rust. It's just me up here telling anecdotes. So we really need to keep doing that. And what we hear over and over again is, like, let's not just run off and do the new shiny thing. Let's figure out exactly why we're doing this and where we want to go, where we want to be. So we're being strategic. We do want to grow and we do want to do the new shiny things because, again, as stewards of the language, if we're not supporting growth, if we're not supporting the future, no one's going to want to use Rust. It's kind of going to kind of wither and die. It'll be a funny anecdote in one of these talks in 10 years' time. And we don't want that. So saying that, oh, look, it's the obligatory AI slide. Because you have to, right? I got told it was part of the speaker notes. There must be at least one slide on AI. That's not true. So yeah, AI, it's the big shiny thing, right? But unlike a lot of other kind of bubbly type technologies, I think AI is something that is just increasingly going to be embedded in everything. It's something that we are probably not even going to be having a conversation on in 10 years' time, because it'll just be part of the fabric of our lives. And you know, we know that Python is king of the LLM. We are not coming for your crown, Python, don't worry. But there's a ton of places where Rust can play a really interesting part, I think, in building AI systems. So these are kind of some of the areas that we are looking to invest at the moment. We're talking to companies and saying, okay, these are areas where Rust actually might be able to improve your product. So if you want to actually talk about any of these things, please come find me. But yeah, there are just huge challenges ahead, right? Everyone has said uncertain world, regulations, you know, big world, terrible, scary. The increasing workload of regulation, of even lobbying, of thinking about that. You know, how many open source foundations were spending this much time like doing kind of government policy lobbying work 10 years ago? Not many. It's a huge part of my week now. CRA calls. So many CRA calls, and they're so boring. Which is not to say they're not important, and I appreciate all of the people that put an enormous amount of effort into it. But oh my God, they're dry. But yeah, you know, all of this stuff, we're getting increasing, you know, requests from companies, profit-making companies, saying, "Can you get someone to do this work for free?" All of this increasing stuff, and there is not a corresponding increase in maintainers flocking to the project, wanting to do work for free. There's not a corresponding increase in people that want to fund this work. So it's a bit of a struggle. We're a small foundation. We are not part of the Linux Foundation, so we don't have a huge kind of machine behind us. We are very scrappy. So we've got some really excellent people and ideas, but we can do very little about that without, outside of our financial constraints. Because again, the line goes up. Just looking at our infrastructure spend, that's scary. That's our infrastructure spend. Between 2022 and 2024, that's a huge rise, and the trajectory is going that way. We're trying to invest in engineering to kind of bring that down to make everything as efficient as it can be. And another shout out to AWS, to Fastly, and to Microsoft, without whom we simply wouldn't even be able to provide Rust. We just simply wouldn't be able to manage these kind of costs to make sure it was out there and available and useful for everyone. So thank you to those organizations, because they are the reason that Rust is here for everyone to use. But ultimately, I kind of want to bring back, this is an open source summit. Everyone here works in the spirit of collaboration. It's about all of us working together. I mean, I have been utterly blown away by how welcoming and how supportive the open source community have been, not just to me personally, but to the Rust Foundation as well. Despite, there's always agitators, the zero-sum game, rewrite everything in Rust. No, we don't need that. We want to work with you. And I'm so impressed all the time by the thoughtfulness and the generosity and the just decency in this room and other rooms like it. I also love that in open source, everyone has 4 hats each? Everyone, right? And that's amazing. It's testament not just to how agile and hardworking everyone is, but how much we all value kind of turning up, contributing, collaborating. That's awesome. That doesn't happen in a lot of industries. So I love that, as the Rust Foundation, we get to be part of this. It's really heartening. And we're better as a kind of very diverse, but very unified community. And when I say unified, I'm not saying we all agree. Most of the time we don't. But we're kind of all here for the same thing. So I kind of just wanted to say that, as the Rust Foundation, we absolutely value being part of this bigger community. Everyone here has been great to us, and we love that, and we want to give back. I want to stress that, whether it's our engineers who are doing great work with Alpha Omega, I have the privilege of being on the board of the OpenSSF at the moment. We have a Rust and C++ interop lead, who is working actively with the C++ community to build bridges there, and not a Rust versus C++. It's like, maybe Rust and C++. Rust in the kernel. We're supporting some of our Rust developers for Rust in Linux. We're here for it all. We want to collaborate. We don't think Rust and only Rust is the future. We think it's part of a really great future with all of the other cool stuff that's going on here. So, we're here for it. We're here for it all. We want to work with you, and we would love to hear all your ideas and just come talk to me, drop me a line, let's have a call, because I know there's a bunch of stuff that we could be doing together with you. So, I just wanted to say thank you very much to the Linux Foundation for having me here. And also, it's my job. I have to say, look, if any of you aren't members of the foundation, I know you are here. Please join us. Please help us support this amazing work. We can't do it without you. Don't just think, it's okay, a couple of the big companies are doing it, so they're fine. That's not the case. Diversity of voices as part of the membership is part of our strength. So please, please, please come and join us if you can, or come to one of our events or whatever. But yeah, that is it from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Rebecca, I really want to apologize on behalf of my town, San Francisco. And just for future reference, there are flights into Sacramento that you can take and then drive down. That's so embarrassing. And there's always bad press about San Francisco. It's not that bad, okay? I'm so sorry. Our next speaker is from the OpenSearch project. I talked earlier about how forks are hard, and a lot of people, when we announced multiple forks last year, everyone was like, it's never going to work. And here's a fun fact that I didn't mention. about Valkey, Redis is now pulling commits from Valkey. And so, which is pretty impressive. I think 8 commits, major feature in their latest release, so it's certainly working. And OpenSearch is doing the same. Today, to share the OpenSearch journey with us, Pallavi Priyadarshini is going to be here. Where is Pallavi? Oh, there's Pallavi. To tell us about what's going on in OpenSearch. Please come on up, Pallavi.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Pallavi Priyadarshini, and I lead the engineering for search at the OpenSearch project. And I'm extremely privileged to stand here to share the journey of OpenSearch as an open source search engine and how community-led innovation has transformed OpenSearch into a Gen AI-powered search engine. Little bit of context setting. So OpenSearch is an Apache 2.0 licensed search and analytics suite and a vector database. It is built on Apache Lucene project. And in September of 2024, it was transferred to the Linux Foundation to build a vendor-neutral community. And the result was formation of the OpenSearch Software Foundation that is comprised of organizations, different organizations, including AWS, SAP, Uber, many more. We had ByteDance join us as a member a couple of days ago. So OpenSearch is a search engine at heart, and we were innovating in the search space. Then 2 things happened. One, the Gen AI momentum that started in 2022 carried on in 2023. And second, our move to the Linux Foundation in 2024. And both of these developments, the Gen AI momentum and the move to Linux Foundation, accelerated the pace of innovation at the OpenSearch project and really transformed it from a keyword-based search engine to a Gen AI-powered search engine. So this is where we were. We were a text-based search engine, and this is search how we know it, right? You have keywords, and the search engine matches the terms and gives you relevant results based on exact matches and the term frequency. We do realize that core search, the keyword search, is foundational to the whole search engine and all of the new use cases that are coming along. So we continue to prioritize the core performance, which is like the speed and efficiency of OpenSearch, even while we are embracing AI. So with the advent of large language models and the boom we are seeing across, we saw OpenSearch being used in a new wave of use cases in the Gen AI workflows. And the OpenSearch project was ready for this wave of new use cases, largely because of its vector database capability. So OpenSearch has a vector engine that enables similarity search with its KNN algorithms and all kinds of data, including text, audio, video, documents. You can use OpenSearch to index those after vector embeddings are generated with the help of transformer models. And after the vector embeddings are indexed in OpenSearch, it is available to all kinds of ML-driven search applications. OpenSearch as a vector database has scaled from millions of vectors to billions of vectors. And using the traditional CPU-based processing, is becoming time-consuming and cost-intensive. So in order to solve that, we are working with NVIDIA to introduce GPU-based acceleration for our indexing workflows. And Uber is also helping us because they want to leverage the GPU acceleration for their large search platform, and they're also contributing back to the OpenSearch project. So with the OpenSearch vector database capability, we have opened up a whole new set of search capabilities. Enter semantic search. You no longer have to just look at keyword matches. Semantic search is able to understand the intent behind a user's query and return you more intelligent, more relevant results. With hybrid search, we are able to combine the precision of lexical or keyword search along with the intelligence of semantic search. With multimodal search, we are able to search across audio, videos, images, etc., along with text. Most recently, we are seeing the increased adoption of sparse models, which are more lightweight deep learning techniques, and which is great for open source because we don't want only the companies with deep pockets to take advantage of AI-powered search. So sparse model makes it accessible for everyone. So the beauty of all these GenAI-powered use cases is the relevancy of your search results can be bolstered by all these large language models that are coming about, right? So we offer easy integration to all these models through open source. We have ML Commons, which is a ML-based library in open source with blueprints that allows ease of development to create connectors to all these large language models. So we offer out-of-box connectors for Cohere, OpenAI, and most recently, DeepSeek. In fact, the blueprints make it so easy that when DeepSeek came out, we were able to roll out a connector in 2 days in open source with the help of our community contributors. ByteDance is helping us do all the ML Commons work. Then we also realized that these Gen AI and RAG workflows are hard for builders, hard to construct because it's a lot of pre-processing, integration with models, etc. So we are introducing the Flow framework, which is like a no-code, low-code builder experience with a drag and drop interface. And Aryan is helping us build conversational search abilities on top of OpenSearch. So in conclusion, OpenSearch has transformed itself into a GenAI-powered search engine, all thanks to open source innovation. It is really the community-led innovation that is shaping the next generation of the search platform. And I have listed several links here. If you want to see what we are up to or want to participate, we are available through Slack. We have many events. There are good tutorials online. So come join us. And it'd be great to see more folks join hand to build the future of search in open source. Thank you so much.
Nice job. That's awesome. That's pretty exciting, actually. Both Valkey and OpenSearch are so impressive in how such a short period of time they've established so much traction in areas that are really actually very difficult to do development work in. Our next speaker is a special treat today. So this morning you heard from Jonathan Bryce, who was there at the launch of OpenStack. We've got, is Chris Anichek around here somewhere? We've got the folks from CNCF in the room. I saw Eric Brewer around here. There he is, of Kubernetes founding fame for working at Google. And of course, we wouldn't be complete without Mesos. So Ben Hindman is the original co-creator of Apache Mesos. Is Sam Ramsey here today? That would just round it out with Cloud Foundry as well. Is it? Yes! Oh my God, the whole gang is here. PaaS, containers, VMs, I love this. So Ben started Mesos as a PhD student at UC Berkeley and later scaled it into a massive infrastructure scaling, web properties like Twitter, Airbnb. He is a renowned expert in distributed systems. Today, he is going to discuss how microservices failed us. So I'm really looking forward to this talk. Come on up, Ben.
All right, appreciate that, Jim. Good to see familiar faces. Today I want to talk about why I think microservices failed us. After over a decade of being in the weeds of both building the tech and helping to get enterprises to adopt it, as well as share a few predictions about what I think we might see in the future. At the end of the day, I think that the core ideas of microservices are fundamentally sound. And that those ideas, I anticipate that those ideas will actually live with us for a long time, and that's really what I'm alluding to in the title. Jim kind of covered it, but I'll be quick. I started in the weeds as one of the co-creators of Apache Mesos, which was one of the first container orchestrators that really helped to ignite the container and microservices era. It ran on tens of millions of cores, to this day still on millions of cores, at large properties like Apple, Twitter, Netflix, Uber, Twitter, where I was actually an employee for many years in the early days. I like to think of it now kind of like the BSD of Kubernetes, which I think should sit well in this audience. After that, I went on to co-found a company around Mesos. We did lots of things of value, but perhaps my favorite thing that we did was host ICE KubeCon at one of the cloud native conferences. If any of you went there, I hope you had a good time. I was straight out of KubeCon, and that was a lot of fun. I was then an early board member of the CNCF and also one of the founding TOC members, and got to really participate a lot in the early days of Kubernetes and a lot of the cloud native tech that was happening. And now, after spending all that time in the weeds, I've been spending a bit more time trying to think about what worked and what didn't work, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. So reflecting of my time in the weeds, I think probably one of the most profound observations that I came out with was this realization that when we were building container orchestrators, we were really building it first and foremost for us, the operators, and not so much for the application developers. In fact, we had to convince the application developers to break their applications into smaller pieces, because that made it easier for us, the operators, to do things like turn machines off, to do, say, software or hardware upgrades, to provision or deprovision resources if we wanted to increase or decrease utilization. And when I talk with my teams now, I like to think of this as one of those times where we stopped thinking too early. We said, great, yeah, this is going to help us as operators. Perhaps there's some trade-offs for the application developers, but it's going to be fine. Everything's going to work out, right? Now, I want to be clear, microservices have a lot going for them. The modularity that you get from architecting software this way makes it easier to understand, modify, and test your code. It gives engineering teams agility because they can operate independently and autonomously. They can operate and deploy. It enables technology diversity if your company's into that, because you can put things behind well-encapsulated APIs, and all of this makes your applications easier to scale, and your companies easier to scale as well. Now, I'm going to be using the word microservices for the rest of the presentation, but most of what I'm talking about applies as much to serverless or functions as a service as microservices as well. Okay? So microservices have a lot going for them, and yet, in so many times, sitting down with organizations trying to adopt them, enterprises, big and small, there were huge hurdles to their success, and I want to talk about what were the top three for me, perhaps not for many of you out there, but the top three for me. Coming in at number 3 was that we told everybody not to adopt them. Now, what do I mean by this? In the early days, because of a lot of the complexities, we told a lot of people that actually microservices was not the place to start. And a lot of really, really smart people that I respect went up and said this. And I can't tell you how many organizations that I was brought into where the number one thing that I was actually asked to do was just tell the teams why you should actually adopt this architecture or pattern in the first place. The conventional wisdom became instead that you should only adopt microservices when you graduate off monoliths, which at the time was a crazy idea, because when you were graduating off monoliths is usually when you were scaling as a company. You were scaling the tech and you were scaling your team, which seems like the perfect time to rewrite your application. We had to do it at Twitter, but it's not because we wanted to, it's just because we had to. So this was really a symptom, so much more than a root cause. The root cause was that we really gave an insufficient abstraction. And I think that this is really best captured by a recent paper from some folks at Google, Sanjay Gemwat and others, the papers Towards Modern Development of Cloud Applications. I think it was in last year's Hot OS, where they say, microservices conflate logical boundaries, how the code is written, with physical boundaries, how the code is actually deployed. And this manifested in us effectively having to tell the entire industry, don't start with it, because it's too hard. My prediction, or perhaps planting a seed of what I think will come in the future, is that we're going to enable developers to be able to write their applications actually logically as monoliths. We can have our cake and eat it too. We should be able to write the software logically as monoliths and let a runtime actually be responsible for deciding how to distribute and actually run that software. And so I think we're going to learn from this mistake, and in the future, we'll see something like this. Okay. The second one, after chatting with these enterprises about trying to adopt them, microservices got adopted, people were successful. The second one that I heard a lot, that again, for my journey, I want to share, perhaps not for everyone else's, but for me, I heard a lot was we completely neglected the front end. The front end reality in a microservices world got so much more complicated. Because rather than speaking with just a single thing on the back end, now we were having to speak with multiple things on the back end, and trying to do that consistently is a huge challenge. Beyond just getting the data out, if we also want to get data updates out, say we want to get data pushed, well, we need to figure out a way to whatever microservice we might have called into, then that microservice probably called into a different service, called into a different service, so forth and so on. We need to figure out a way to get all those updates to somehow propagate and trickle all the way back out. And how to do that in real time. And then finally, how can these front ends actually perform mutations when users are actually doing things safely in the back ends when us container orchestrators keep turning off parts of the back end, because that was the whole point of putting container orchestrators in the first place. So some of you might be thinking, why is front end a microservices problem? And I would argue that front end is just a problem of anyone that's trying to do cloud native computing, of which microservices is a huge part. And microservices just made the front end challenge so much harder that it impedes its adoption and success, where today when people are thinking about new applications they want to build, they likely have a front-end component, and they're not thinking, oh, microservices are somehow going to make this easier. More importantly, though, I think neglecting to incorporate the needs of your clients is a bad strategy. Whatever back-end system architecture we want to make, we should think first and foremost about how people are going to be using this and what things we can possibly be doing to actually make their lives better. So the prediction here, or the seed I want to plant, is that I think actually this is going to happen. I think we're going to see more and more back-end architectures that are trying to introduce different kinds of primitives in the programming model itself. They're allowing you to do things like technical words, reactivity or idempotency, that can dramatically simplify that full stack experience. All right. The number one thing that I ran into with working with organizations, I can summarize as fundamentally, we gave everybody a dangerous abstraction. Microservices was dangerous. To help explain this, I want to use this example. This is a checkout of some code that's doing a checkout like you could imagine in any e-commerce application. It's doing things like, the cart's getting the items, and then you're calling it the shipping microservice to prepare the ship order, and then the payment service to authorize the charge, and then ship the order, empty the cart, so forth and so on. And when you first look at this code, there's a lot to really like about it, right? We're writing code compositionally, which, modularity and composition is what helps our applications be able to be reasoned about and scaled. So this is great. Independent teams can own different services like the catalog, cart, shipping, payment, emailer. But there's a problem here. What's the problem? The problem is that if there happens to be a failure after we called into the payment service to authorize the charge and before we actually shipped the order, what happens? Right? Anybody that's run microservices in anger, which I imagine are some of you, are probably like, yeah, Ben, you don't write microservices that way. That's just not what you do. The developer's intent here when they were writing this code is that this gets executed atomically. That's what they wanted, right? They were just trying to compose a bunch of different functions that they'd hope would get executed atomically. And of course, idempotently on retry. If they happen to retry, it only happened once. That was the developer's intent. But that's not what happened. When I talk about this example with people, I feel like there's really two buckets that you can put yourselves in. One bucket is you run microservices in anger, and you're like, yeah, Ben, that's just not the way you write microservices. And the other bucket, which is most of us, is, oh my God, does my company have these bugs in production right now because we just wrote a bunch of code via microservices like this? It makes sense that people might be worried about writing code like this because this example, this checkout example that I gave you, is actually straight from Google Cloud Platform's microservices demo. This is the example that 90+% of the people that are going to build microservices base it off of, and anybody that would be building that would have that problem directly. And these are real bugs. These are real bugs that I love to capture screenshots for all the time. This was me actually depositing a check at Schwab. I got a hey, failed to deposit check. Okay, or try again. I mean, naturally, I wanted to deposit my check, so I clicked the try again button. About 24 hours later, I got this email. That was successful. And then about 24 hours later, I got this email. Update to your recent check deposit. You were unable to process your mobile check deposit. Please give us a call. It's my $219 check. I gave them a call. And they look into it. And then they politely accused me of bank fraud, trying to deposit a check twice. Of which I sort of mumbled something idempotency, and then realized it was on the wrong crowd, and said, no, trust me, I'm not trying to deposit a check twice. This was just a mistake. You see this all the time. Wrong way. All right. It's all lost. No. The engineering community, I think, has risen to the challenge and are solving a lot of these problems with tech. But the tech that we're using to solve the problems is adding even more complexity. What actually gives me hope is the rejuvenation of folks trying to design better abstractions, of which I think microservices are the best starting point. But there's some innovation there that I predict will actually usher in an industrial revolution of sorts, a really productive time for cloud-native development that I think will get us all writing software for the cloud differently in the next few years. All right, of course, the obligatory AI slide. Isn't this all moot in the age of AI? I mean, come on. We don't want AI writing software based on a foundation that is buggy. We want to give it the right corpus upon which it can be writing our software. So it behooves us to spend some time actually trying to fix this. Hope you learned something. If you're interested in this, I'd love for you to join us in trying to think about what are the next generation abstractions for cloud-native computing. Thanks so much.
Awesome. That's cool. I actually learned something new there. I learned that Ben has $4,327 in his checking account. Thanks, Ben. That was a good talk. So this year, we are adding a new offering to our programming, and it is hosted by someone who I've worked with for a very long time. But we're creating an opportunity for a series of unconferences at this event. We hope to make that a tradition at our member summit. And the person who we've tasked and called upon to lead this is Jono Bacon. He's the founder of the Community Leadership Core, the author of The Art of Community. Jono, come on up and tell us about this new Unconference Kickoff.
All right. How's everyone doing? All right, cool. How many of you have been here before to Member Summit? All right, good group. Great. So one of the things that I always love about this event and all open source events is just the insight that exists in the open source community. Like, we see it all over the place in different events, in different projects, in different settings, is when we bring all of that kind of insight together to learn new things. And the thing that's always struck me about Member Summit is that it's kind of a network of brains. Like, everyone in this room has different skills and expertise and background and experience. You've tried some things that have worked, some things that have not worked. And I remember seeing this especially earlier on in my career, when we were building the Ubuntu community. You know, we'd run these Ubuntu developer summits every 6 months, and people from all over the world would fly out. And we had a large community, like 60 million users, about 340,000 active contributors who were writing code and doing documentation and translations and setting up local user groups and things like that. But what really struck me about these events, because we use this unconference format, was we weren't sitting there watching presentations. And there's nothing wrong with presentations, of course, but fundamentally in a presentation setting, you've got one person who's sharing their expertise with the group. But what really struck me about how we ran these events in the Ubuntu Developer Summits was everybody was engaging, everybody was talking. And sometimes the most profound insight and wisdom in those settings were actually from people who were brand new at this, who were brand new to this environment, right? This is something that I've taken into my company, the Community Leadership Core. We work with a ton of different companies, helping them to build user and developer ecosystems. And this format, both online and in person, has become pretty fundamental. So I was chatting to Jim a little while back, and one of the things I was saying was, like, the thing that I always love about Member Summit, and the thing that I've had multiple conversations at this event about with other people, is the hallway track, right? Illustrated by Zahida and Nithya here. It's hanging out there, talking, having conversations, having coffee, grabbing lunch together, having breakfast with each other, where all of these interesting kind of conversations come out. So what we're going to do today is we're going to experiment with this unconference format. This is brand new, and kudos to the events team for kind of pulling this together. But this is really about unlocking the wisdom in this room. And I'm just going to give a quick overview about how this works and then what you can expect. How many of you have been to an unconference before? Yeah? So some of you have done this. That's great. So this is kind of how it works. I've been running this event called the Community Leadership Summit for the last 15 years, which is slightly concerning because I think I might be getting older. And we're going to operate a little differently because a kind of classic traditional unconference, you make the schedule together at the beginning of the day, and we thought that's going to be too much for this one. So on the schedule, you'll be able to see all of these different unconference sessions. Who in this room is running one of these unconference sessions? Where are my facilitators? All right, these people are amazing human beings who are going to keep you all on track, all right? So let's say, for example, we look at Emma's session. What's going to happen is when you get to that session, it's going to look a little bit like this. It's going to be a bunch of chairs in a circle. If you want to talk a little bit more actively in that session, feel free to sit towards the front. If you'd rather just kind of sit in and listen in, you can sit towards the back. And we're going to have a conversation. There's no presentation. There's not going to be one person speaking to the group. It's a facilitated discussion. And those folks who put their hands up are going to be facilitating and kind of keeping the conversation rolling, right? So this is how I'm going to recommend we all do these sessions, okay? So these sessions are about 60 minutes long. Maybe you want to try and get to about 55 minutes, give people time to kind of get out and hit the bathroom and stuff like that. So at the beginning, introduce the topic. This is what the facilitator will do. Each of these sessions has got a very specific topic. And what's really important here is to avoid round-robin intros. I know some of you will want to do this, but that eats up like 15 minutes. And after the third intro, we're all bored, right? We've all been there before. So just kind of introduce the topic, what you want to kind of get out of the discussion. Then what happens is I'd recommend you map out, like, what are the kind of things we want to get into, right? So for example, I'm going to be running a session later about how to measure the impact, how to measure open source and participation and impact. So I'd say, you know, I'd like to talk about metrics here and how we measure. What are some things we want to get out of this discussion? Oh, we want to talk about which systems, which platforms, what's the role of chaos in this, blah, 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 blah. Then what happens is you have the conversation, right? You discuss that. You kind of go around the group and have a conversation like you'd have in any kind of meeting at work. And there's a couple of things I'm going to recommend here. First of all, try to encourage everybody to feed in and speak, right? And try to stay on topic with this. Now, this is where the facilitators, we've talked to all the facilitators, they're going to be playing a role in trying to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak. There's some people in this room who are introverts, there are some people who are extroverts, and there are some of us who are ambiverts, which are a bit of a mixture of the two, right? We don't want the extroverts to take over, despite them having monumental amounts of wisdom, because the introverts sometimes feel a little weird about chipping in. So this is a good opportunity where you can say things like, you know, anyone not spoken yet want to kind of share something that we haven't covered? Those kinds of things is what we want to do here. What's really important in these sessions is, one, is to manage the verbose ramblers. Now, there's some people in this room who are ramblers. You know who you are. Knock it off, all right? We don't need 10 minutes to explain something that can take a minute, right? And it's not rude at all for someone to say, you know what, why don't we, let's kind of move on, make sure we've got time to cover everything, okay? But again, try not to ignore the introverts. Just because someone's quiet and they're sat there doesn't mean that, that they don't want to participate. And some of the most impactful elements of these conversations can be people who've been sat there quietly. Then, I'd recommend 5 minutes before you wrap up, you say to everyone, okay, what really struck you as like an aha moment? It could be like a tiny little thing that somebody said or a big insight. Just go around, put your hand up. Oh, I thought it was really interesting when Sarah said this. Oh, I thought it was really interesting when Mohammed said this, et cetera, et cetera. And then get out in time, right? And then you go out, check the board, see what's next, and that's how we do it. Now, there's 3 really important things I want to emphasize throughout this as you go through this. It's a little different. The first one is I'd encourage everybody to be collaborative. I think one of the most amazing things about open source is we all have different opinions, perspectives, and sometimes if we're debating things, which is encouraged, it can kind of dominate the conversations. Try to make sure that we're collaborative, we're kind of going around the houses, make sure everyone's got an opportunity to kind of engage. The second thing, how many of you, this is your first member summit? Yeah? Great. How many of you have been working in open source for less than a year? Yeah? A couple of people? Well, here's the thing. Sometimes when people are new at this, there's a feeling like, well, I'm in this room with people who've been doing this for 35 years. Doesn't matter. Some of the most profound wisdom can come from people who are brand new at this, right? Because for those of us, I've been in this community for 27 years, so you forget what it's like when you kind of join and get started. So don't be afraid to kind of feed in. And then the third one is what's called the law of mobility, is where if you feel like you're not really getting a lot out of the session and you're not really contributing very much, feel free to leave. We're making a social agreement here today that it's completely okay to get up and leave and go to another session. It doesn't mean it's a reflection on the session that you're in, okay? And then, and then what we're going to do is, on the final session of today, we're going to do a wrap-up. We're all going to come back here, and those aha moments that you've gathered in some of those discussions today, we're going to share them as a group, because we can't be in all of those different sessions at the same time, right? And I love doing this, because we're going to go around, we're going to pass the mic out, and you can just share some of the things that you really took away today. So there'll be a lot of insight to kind of share in there as well. And that's going to be happening at 4:50 in this room, all right? So that's it. It's a little new. We're going to experiment, see what it's like, and hopefully we'll have a great time. All good? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. All right, I'm looking forward to this format. I'm definitely going to be in these sessions pontificating for at least 15 minutes straight. And if anybody gets up and leaves, you're not coming back. All right, thanks, Jono. I'm really looking forward to this. Next, I want to do a quick plug for a book signing that we're doing. Arun Gupta is here. I can't see where he is in the room. Oh, he just left for the signing. So we announced Arun's book in the fall, Fostering Open Source Culture. It is now out and on Amazon, and we're having a book signing today. So this is really an interesting book. You should check it out, and they'll be signing right outside right now. I also want you all to join us tonight at the CIA, no, not that CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, which is here in Napa. I'm actually a former student, so I encourage you all to come. It's at the Copia campus, which is close to downtown Napa. They've got a super cool museum there and all kinds of good food. Shuttles will be right out here at 5:45 by the market area, and we'll loop back until 9:30 p.m. So go enjoy the Unconference book signing outside event tonight, and we'll see you at the wrap-up session here today at 4:50. Thank you.
What you doing? And in my head I paint a picture. Well, since I come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair.